So welcome to Bee Talks. We have some honored guests here tonight that have returned from their travels abroad. Bill Ricker being one of them, and you'll soon see me traveling also. Uh, so it should be a good year. We are going to start this evening with assuming that our bees survive, and so let's first address that whole issue that you might be seeing where we're having a catastrophe in die-offs this year in the United States among our commercial beekeepers that are pollinators by trade. And what's happening is a massive die-off. And it hasn't been since around 2005, 2006, since we had something like this. And at that point, it was coined CCD, colony collapse disorder, an unfortunate name we gave it. And actually, the cause of the original CCD back in 2005 and 6 was never analyzed to the extent where we came to a concrete conclusion of what happened. But what occurs in the colony is about a silver dollar size group of bees are left in the colony, some brood, all the honey, and then the bees just sort of like disappear. Well, the same thing, I guess, is happening pretty much now. And folks that are in the pollinating business are sending me some alarming emails thinking that this is going to be a really upsetting event for pollinators and may be a real game changer for them, because at this point, the pollination prices, which rose steadily since the 2006 CCD event, are sort of munching into the margin of the almond growers, and they don't like that. So they've been working on a few retorts to the ever increasing pollination price. The folks that are supplying colonies to pollinate to orchards are charging more and more every year, and they've come up with a self-pollinating almond tree. Now, it won't be something that they'll be able to switch over to overnight, but it is something that they will continue to pursue. And at some point, they won't need pollinators for almonds. And so a self-pollinating almond tree is not an unusual thing to think about. And, that'll be the end. So we'll have to see. This year will be a turning point in this pollination operation, and for all pollinators, because they are already losing 50 to 60% of their colonies. And it happened on a broad scale, even in yards that are well cared for, meaning that they have low varroa count, no nosema, healthy stores, and they dwindled and died anyway. So the leading suspect is a novel pathogen, likely a virus or a bacteria of some kind that found its way airborne or some other way throughout this massive colony loss. Now, we're talking about big numbers of colony losses, not just a little bit. So normally, what you'll see is beekeepers this time of year vying for some federal help, low interest loans and so on, so forth, based on their losses. And I thought that's what was occurring this time too. They were just like making a big deal out of something that was sort of regular. But it turns out that at this point, we got a lot of stuff going on for colonies dying in the commercial beekeepers. So we don't know much about what's causing it. We do know that it's a catastrophe for pollinators, and it's going to change something in the pollination business. All right, so there are some questions about that. So I want to clarify that doesn't affect us, backyard beekeepers. We're not moving our colonies around. We're not putting them in harm's way. We're not putting them in holding yards with a million other bee colonies. So, so if there is a pathogen that's spreading among those migratory beekeepers or pollinators, we're not part of that as backyard beekeepers. And we only have a few commercial operations that pollinate in Connecticut, and they're local beekeepers. So we should be fine. We'll see what happens. Is it all down south? No, it's not all down south. This is, up in California, and all of the beekeepers that do that almond pollination in the almond crop. You can get online and read. All right. With that said, we have nothing to report in terms of, I think we have nothing to report in terms of our bloom calendar. You won't see bees flying next week for sure. I don't think. If you see your bees flying next week, there's a problem in your colony, because it's going to go down into the single digits at night, and there will be, highs in the 30s. So bees aren't going to fly. We won't have anything to report until the early part of March. We might get some things out depending on how the weather goes. From here on, we could get some silver maples out. We could get, that would probably be toward the middle of March or maybe the end. Skunk cabbage could come out, things like that, which will draw your bees out of the colony. And on days when they can fly, they will be out there trying to get some of that stuff. All right, so that's what you'll probably see. So you still have enough time to feed your bees if you need to. You can heft the colonies to see how they're going through their stores. In really, really cold weather, keep in mind that it seems like your bees should be using a lot of stores because it's really, really cold, but that's not the case. What will happen is your colonies will go into an ultra low metabolic rate when things get really cold and the cluster gets real tight. Whereas around the 40-degree mark, when they're above 40 degrees, is when they start to use more stores per degree of temperature. So down below that, they're conserving their stores. So they're in good shape. They don't need you to open them colonies at really low temperatures either. And real low temperatures, if you're thinking about treating with oxalic acid vaporization or anything like that, you should hold off because it's not a good time for you to be puffing oxalic acid vapor into a colony which has a real tight packed cluster. Right. So right at this point, your clusters are really tight and compact. The mantle's doing a great job of insulating the rest of the cluster. But the problem that you might have is if you don't have insulation on at all at this time of year, especially top insulation, your colony loses more heat because of obviously because the outside temperature is low. Let's start at the top there and read some of your questions. Ask every question you can think of that you are afraid to ask in any other format, and we'll answer them here. We got plenty of good beekeepers on this call that can help with answering your questions, including me and some other folks I see here that I know have lots of experience and will help out the answers that I don't quite know the answer to. So Gail's asking that she saw dead bees. That's usually a good sign this time of year. And especially if you see frass spots in the snow, that means that your bees had an opportunity to take a cleansing flight, and likely that colony is alive. Right. So remember, the way colonies die in March, right? So they can be quite alive in February and then suffer from spring dwindling or die off with lack of food stores in March, near the end of March, actually, or sometime in the middle of March. So make certain that if you've lifted your colonies and they feel extremely light, then it's probably time for you to make a sugar cake or something and put them on top. Otherwise, you can just leave them alone. If they still have a lot of honey, that's fine. You can just leave them like they are, and they'll be great. Yeah, so that's what that means. They've had cleansing flights, and Roberta is correct in that she says that you have good undertaker bees. You probably won't be able to hear them unless you have a stethoscope. Don't do anything crazy to try to find out if they're alive. They're definitely alive. Make sure the entrance is clear at this time of the year also, because you could have an accumulation of dead bees on the bottom board at this point where your mantle bees have been dying from old age. Perfectly normal. Maybe it went into the fall with 30,000 bees or 25,000 bees, and 5,000 of them have died already. So they can clog your exit if you don't have them clear. In the case where you see dead bees on the outside and spotted snow, your entrance is clear, but it doesn't hurt you to take a look at them anyway. That's what your job in February is, to make certain that your bees' bottom entrance is open so your bees can get out. There's plenty of published references and data sources to alleviate the loss this year. It's not anecdotal. You can see just search commercial beekeeping losses this year, and you'll get the Bee Informed Partnership and all the rest of the publications that we can trust. You'll get their data and you'll see exactly what's happening. Okay, so George wants to know, when is a good time for an OA treatment? In my opinion, that wouldn't be, by OA treatment, I'm assuming a vaporization, but what do you mean, George? Because OA treatments, there's a few different types.
So I'm not sure, actually, and I'm glad you asked. So whether it's a vaporization or dribble or
I highly suggest you don't dribble, especially
okay.
weather. The only option you would have at this point, in my opinion, is to use a vaporization device. And then you wouldn't want to do that when the cluster is extremely tight. So, if you can get a 50-degree day, that would be the time for you to do it. And you will get them. There'll be days where there'll be highs in the 50s, and there were plenty in December. Now going into and January, there was also plenty. In February now, there's not going to be any for the next couple of weeks, next week for sure. So you can't do it next week. But yeah, when it gets into the 50s, especially when you see some flight activity, some cleansing activity, that the cluster is broken at that point, and then you could shoot a little bit of oxalic acid in them at that point.
That's good. So wait for the little activity. Okay.
Yeah, wait for a little activity. And so, yeah, you don't want to do that too many. So my choice for an electric fence is from Premier Fence. I think they make some reasonably priced, extremely good equipment. They've been in the business for a very, very long time. They have a really responsive customer service. They make what they call a beekeeper's fence. So it's a mesh. It has nylon wire and an electrode that goes all the way around in different levels, all the way through the mesh netting. So if you can provide house current to it, meaning that you can plug it in somehow to your electrical supply, and that's not usually doable for beekeepers that have hives out in the back of their yard or in some other yard somewhere. If you can do that, fine. That's a very reliable power source. If not, you would have to use a solar charger, which has a couple of deep discharge batteries in it. And those get to be a little bit pricey, but those you can hook up and run your bear fence all year long. Now, I take mine in the wintertime. I bring the charger in. Premier will ask you to bring the net in also. I never do that, but I do bring the charger in, and I have a set of batteries on trickle charge that I swap out in the early spring. So when bears get active again here, there won't be much bear activity in the next week or so, I don't think. But when it does get warm, and they'll come out, and then at that point you have to have some kind of protection from bears. Every city in the state of Connecticut has bears. You may not see one, but look up any town in in Connecticut, and you'll find out. And in the United States, and you'll see how many bears were cited in that state. And in our case, it's the DEP, I think, the DEP that keeps track of that. So you'll see, I've never ever saw a bear in Cheshire, and there were like 12 sightings last year in the town where I live and close by. I never saw them. When is the best first treatment varroa? In the spring. So I think we answered that. Your first best treatment for varroa in spring is probably the use of Varroxsan, which is a product that we just got access to last fall. And it is a low temperature treatment. And maybe everybody on this call should take a note about this, that if you are concerned about varroa, a treatment of Varroxsan early in the spring will help you. You can put it on with brood, and it stays on for a very long time. So it's a time-released oxalic acid glycerin-based product, and it will stay in your colony for a period of time. And you follow the instructions on the package. You put it right in the brood nest and leave them there, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I left mine in over winter, and I did that on other products that were like this that we were experimenting with a few years back, and they survived the winter, and they still continue to kill mites. I used it in the fall. It was extremely effective to kill mites this fall, and I suggest that you consider using it. I think it's a good product for you to start out with, especially early spring when we really don't have a product that works well. I would discourage you from using any of the neurotoxins like Apivar or those, but this product should serve you well. And they've done something really interesting with it. They had it only in 90 strip packages, and I noticed now that they were quick to address the market, and they have now put it together in a package that is, I don't know how many are in a package now, maybe 29 or something. I looked at it briefly, but it does address our issue of not wanting to spend $90 for something that we only have for a couple colonies. And so last year I bought a bunch of it. I brought it to the bee yard, and I distributed it from there for people who wanted to try it, because I was concerned about the price for people to try it for just a couple colonies. So we did that. Yeah, Man Lake has it. Yeah. So that's a 20 pack for $40. Still a lot of money, but worth saving your bees, that's for sure. And it will last you. You can keep it for a while. You can actually freeze it. I've talked to the manufacturer. And so if you're not going to be using it right away, if you want to preserve it and use it later on in the season again, or or continually use it throughout the season. You can freeze it and secure it from degrading, and then put it back on the colony.
Do you treat all your colonies at the same time?
Yeah, all of them at the same time. I do. Yeah, because I have, I'll have 20 in a yard, so they all get treatment. I don't even bother with and I'll tell you why in a minute. Here's my thoughts on what we're left with in terms of our ability to be able to assess the varroa levels in our colony. I think that our drops, unless you are a professional, our current method of trying to measure the amount of mites that are in a colony is very difficult to do, because we have a threshold that we're trying to keep at 2%. And that's such a small amount of mites in a wash that missing one is highly likely. Or, so I don't worry about overestimating, but I do worry about when you're on that level, when you've gotten 5 mites and you're saying, I didn't get the 6 mite threshold, so I don't need to treat. That's probably wrong, because if you look at some of the earlier studies where folks have put mites in containers and left them in there. Now, you should look at, I'll give you a name to look up, Zach Lamas. He's a scientist. He just gave a talk. Look up his work, and you'll find that he has some interesting studies on time, long-term washes, meaning not a minute and then reading the mite count, but leaving the mites in the alcohol for like 19 hours or 24 hours or something like that, and coming back and checking them and seeing the difference in the mite count. And it's incredible. I mean, there's, what we're doing, I think, is abbreviated in that we just shake them for a minute or two and then read the results. And then we're subjected to failing to pick the right population of bees to check for mites. So there's so many variables that can go wrong with a wash that, in my opinion, I think that we're best to try to control varroa. That's the situation I think we're in. And for new beekeepers who are hesitant to even look inside their colonies, thinking about doing a mite wash is almost impossible for them. So if we can save them the heartache of losing bees to varroa while they learn how to do it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to learn how to do a mite wash and figure things out for yourself. You can, but in the meantime, if you put in some Varroxsan strips, they're totally harmless to your bees. The oxalic acid doesn't stay in the colony. It dissipates after it's released. The glycerin is wonderful because bees don't eat it. The medium that is used for distribution stays pretty much intact. So it's a pretty good product, and I think we should try to use it.
Can you just explain like the process of what you do when you put it in the brood section? Like, how would that work?
So what I do is I just put 4 in every colony. I put 4 in the brood nest. So the instructions are not clear and kind of cryptic. So my experience with alum cap was that alum cap will instruct you to put 4 strips in the colony around the brood nest and separate them in a certain way. And Varroxsan does the same thing, but you can't follow it. Let's say your brood nest at this point is on 3 frames, and you put it according to the Varroxsan instructions, you would only put 2 strips in that colony, and you separate them by a frame width. So you skip a frame and put them in there. So if you did that, then you would have 2 frames in that colony, and then your bees would start to blow up in March, and now before you turn around, there's 6 frames of bees in there, and you've got 2 strips in. What I decided to do was, put them around the brood nest, all 4, and let them run that way. You're not going to overdose them with oxalic acid. It's not going to be possible. You're not going to kill a single bee with those strips.
And
Unless,
so is it sticky on one side? You could
no
stick
sticky. It's not sticky at all. Nope. The other thing good about it is it's really beekeeper friendly in that it doesn't have a lot of protective gear you need to use. You can use a breathing mask if you want, but you won't even be able to smell the oxalic acid. It's advisable for you to wear gloves only because it's an acid product, and oxalic acid it's a high acid, and one of the highest, and so you don't want to get it on your skin. That's all. Yeah, and you got to handle it. You have to handle it consciously. You can't lay it around and things like that. So just put it on the colony and close it up. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's what I did.
You're putting 4 strips on per colony?
Yeah, per brood. Yeah, I'm on, by this time of year, when you got into the boxes, you'll have a single brood box. I
Yeah.
mean, your bees will all be in one box in spring. That's what I'm saying. So thanks for clarifying that, Bill. Yeah, so I'm just talking about this spring treatment. Now, if you end up with 2 boxes of bees, and this is the first time you're putting it on, then you follow the instructions. It shows you what to do for 2 boxes, where you'd put 4 strips in that colony, 4 in the top box and 4 in the bottom box. So we have another question from Lisa, and Lisa saying her mentor suggesting I use their frames from their supers that they have froze for a bit in my new hives. Would you recommend this practice?
Yeah, sure. So, I bought 2 new beehives, and, obviously we're gonna start with the deep and, let the colony grow. But once we put the supers on top, they were suggesting that I put their frames that already have honeycomb drawn out on them into my supers. They aren't full of honey. They've already extracted the honey from the, with the centrifuge and everything. But I was kind of like on the fence about that. I didn't really want to do that.
All right, so are you running mediums?
No, there's one deep, and then the supers, I guess, would be mediums. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you reuse those supers over again after you extract them. Absolutely.
But what I'm saying is, into my new hive, would I use their old frame?
I think he's saying to draw your bees up into the empty foundations, to put a smelly old frame in there that they will like. And that would be a good thing to do, except it's always dangerous to use other people's honey. That's all I have to say. As a lure. So you could also lure by spraying your foundation and otherwise empty frames with like sugar water or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lisa, what are you talking about? Because I'm not clear about that. I mean, I understand what Roberta's saying, but what are you saying? So you have a colony and you put its queen excluder on it, or you put supers on it and they drew out the wax and you had honey and you extracted that?
No, with my new frame, nothing's drawn out yet. So they were suggesting that I use their frames that are drawn out in my new hive. My hive's brand new. I haven't even
There,
constructed
meaning
it.
your mentor's frame?
Yes.
See, when I
Yes.
heard you say there, I thought you were talking about bees.
No.
You're-
My mentor's frames that they already have with comb drawn out.
Yeah, well, you could, but you can also learn how to get your own frames drawn out. So if you want, your frames are just foundation, is what I'm hearing. Right?
Correct.
So not drawn out. So you can make sure you put a little bit extra wax on them. You can coat them with a little bit of extra wax. And then you can feed above those frames and get the bees to draw comb. So learn how to get your bees to draw your own comb. If you know for certain that your mentor's frames are healthy, then you could do that, assuming that you checked with the bee inspector to make sure that she would allow that to happen, because it's technically illegal to move frames or any kind of equipment from yard to yard in Connecticut without bee inspection. All right. So
Okay, good. I'm glad I know that.
Yeah, you have to be careful about that. So I'm guessing that you're gonna start a new hive.
Correct.
So make sure that, I don't know what kind of foundation you're using in the new hive. Are you just using like a plastic foundation, or?
I believe they are. It's I bought it off Amazon. I haven't constructed it yet. I believe so.
All right, and then them I think melt a little wax in a pot and use a little brush and brush that wax on. Not super thick, but you'll see how it goes on fairly easy, because another little extra wax on that foundation will help them get started on it. And then feed it. You're gonna have to put in 1-to-1 syrup in the spring. Let the bees draw wax off of that. All right.
Thank you.
So I'm a urban beekeeper in New York City, and I will have hives in Southern Connecticut this season. Curious about, when does spring prep normally begin for you all? And how many honey flows do you typically get a season? Well, Belinda, our spring turnaround, or buildup, as you might say, begins during May and June. That's when we're really in the height of our spring buildup. Now, spring prep is meaning that when you try to prepare your bees for the spring upcoming. Do you want to flesh that out a little bit, Belinda?
Yeah, so I have the equipment coming. I just want to know, when should I prepare to install the new bees?
Oh, okay, yeah, so you can do that as early as the end of March if you have some packages ordered.
Okay.
But I suggest if you're brand new at this, are you brand new at it, Paul?
No.
Oh, okay. So then you can put March bees in because you might know how to handle March bees, but otherwise you would do April bees,
And
early.
you say you typically get your first build up in the beginning
Yeah,
of.
so your packages will take 10 weeks to build in our climate.
Mhm.
So you'll miss generally our packages miss first year main flow because 10 weeks from the time you put them in, we're
Mhm.
already past our main spring flow, depending on where you are down in Stamford. Did you say Stamford? You said Southern CT.
It'll be in Greenwich.
Okay, in Greenwich, yeah. So I don't really know what the flow is exactly like there, but I'm sure that'll be similar to what we experience in the rest of the state, and you'll get a fairly intense, nice flow.
First flow happens when then?
Early in spring, so it starts, sometime in the end of March, and then in April they're foraging for sure. Now I have a bloom calendar that I normally share, and I'll show you what's going on. I mean, this is really good that you asked this question so we can show everybody. All right, so here's what happens to us. So normally somewhere around late February, you can see up there, we'll begin to get some really minor floral stuff that comes out. Helleborus is out all year. It flowers really early, somewhere around February, at the end of February, but it's not something that you can really count on. But you will get some pollen from alder in the early March, and then you can see there's a few things that start. Skunk cabbage, middle of March, silver maples, sometimes they'll be out in the earlier March, and then the red dead nettle is a yard thing. You'll see those. Those are not important flows, but bees will go out and work them. But now take a look at April. So April has all of those floral sources for bees. And this is, by the way, this is something I've been doing for like 8 years now. So all of the common name for those plants in the first column are something that I saw bees on. So you can go right down there, pussy willows, soft maples, red maples, cherries, queen bumblebees fly around the middle by April 10th. Then you got crocus, more maples, the stone fruits come out, plums, apricots. Then you got dandelion, crabapple. It goes on and on. Peach, red bud. All of those things are available for bees to forage on in April. And it goes on again all through May. Not as many, but more important ones in May. So you can see all the ones that really are going to come out in May. And there's some real big hitters in May. Autumn olive being one. You got plenty of that stuff down there. And you'll see all kinds of ground ivy that's up. Honeysuckle will be out. Black locust, tulip poplar, big floral sources for bees. That's what happens in April and May. And that's why I think, we're looking at 8 weeks and your bees won't be up to full strength until you get to June.
Okay.
And then a lot of things come out in June. So that's why sometimes packages can make honey in June, but they normally don't.
So you typically have 2 flows then?
Yeah,
And
and then there's another flow. All right. So the other flow is, I'm going to stop this share. The other flow starts
One in New York. That's why I'm surprised.
the other flow starts here in August. So you have then a lot of interesting trees that come out, and you have clethra. If you're in that area, sometimes down near the shore, you'll get a lot of clethra. Joe pie weed, another little plant that bees will get stuff up. BB tree comes out, jewelweed, wonderful stuff. Purple loosestrife, if there's any down there. Dogbane will be out, Rosa Sharon. But at the end there, you'll see goldenrod and bull thistle. As the time goes on, you'll see in September, you'll see mugwort, ragweed, sweet clover, all of that stuff will come out. And you can make a fall flow here in Connecticut. I don't really recommend that you do that and take that from your bees. It's nice to let that sit in your hive and let them overwinter with those stores. You have to do less feeding in the fall. So if you take as a honey producer for years and years, I took 2 harvests from my colonies, and I found out that my winter losses were greater when I did that, even if I fed back syrup. So now I leave the second flow on my colonies, so I don't take it.
Where in Connecticut are you located?
Cheshire. So I'm in the middle of the state.
And when does swarm season typically begin for you?
It will begin way too early in May, May, and it'll go through June, and, so yeah. And then it'll occur again in a minor way in September. Yeah, so those are what we refer to as suicide swarms. So we really do have two swarm seasons in Connecticut, right exactly at the beginning of the main flow, because that's when they swarm.
Okay.
And then they swarm again in the fall, as I mentioned. There's another question. Is it still advisable to do OA vaporization treatment if temperature rises above 40 in the daytime, but drop back to, yeah, it doesn't matter what happens at night with the OA vaporization, Teresa, as long as it's warm enough to have a less than really, really tight cluster, you're fine to do that. The distribution of OA is very, very immediate. The vapor that comes out of that device reforms as small crystals almost immediately. 10 minutes after they exit, they're all, actually, it's probably way less than 10 minutes. They're already doing their job. And they're all over bees and they're on mites and on and all of that. So that's how vaporization works really fast. And so you don't have to worry about the rest of it. And varroa will die from the next 10 days or so as a result of that treatment. Yeah, it doesn't matter what happens at night. So Eric, I have a hive that has been eating all the sugar on one side of an insulated top, right side. Can I flip the top around, which would put the vent hole? Yeah, I really discourage you from doing any kind of venting in a winter colony. That's just not something I believe is valuable for you to do. If you're putting a vent hole in the upper part of your colony during the wintertime, you're just drawing a lot of cold. You in effect have provided a thermodynamic called the stack effect. So what that does is that draws cold air into the bottom of your colony and exhausts hot air out the top. So yeah, the vent hole's not that important. So you can do whatever you want with that sugar. It sounds like you've put in a fondant, a hard candy fondant. Is that right, Eric?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. So, and you made a softball, you heated that up and made a softball?
Exactly.
Okay, good. Don't do that again, Eric.
And these tops came with the holes. Should I cover them up? Those little vent holes?
I would encourage you to just put a piece of tape over them or something like that. So two things, try not to ventilate a lot of that heat out of your colony. It's no good for your bees, and your bees are fine without that. Look up my articles on this and in Bee Culture and American Bee Journal. I've written extensively on this topic, and I give talks about it all the time around the country. So, and I've been studying these thermodynamics in bee colonies since 2006. So I've got a little bit of time under my belt trying to figure this thing out. And so the problem with fondant is that when you make fondant, the hard candy fondant, by heating it, what you do is you actually create a molecule it's HMF, hydroxymethylfurfenol, right? So it's you don't have to know that name, but you do need to know that molecule is poisonous to bees. So, it's a little poisonous to bees. So you really don't know how much you make when you make that fondant on your stove. So my opinion is it's much safer for you to just make sugar cake. And there's a recipe on the ctbees.org. If you can follow.
Okay. I misunderstood the question. You'll be happy to know I heard you say that before. We did not heat it up. We added water to sugar and made the cake.
Oh, Eric, you're all right.
Using the recipe.
Okay. Okay. All right. It wasn't fondant then. It was a sugar cake. All right. So yeah. So anyway, so I'll just in the interest of moving on, I'll abandon that discussion. But just know that it's not really good to heat up sugar. And all right. So Eddie wants to know that he says, I'm brand new. I need 2 hives. I want them pre-made, probably 8 frames. I live in Tolland. I've been shopping online. Prices and styles are all over the map. What's a good hive setup for newbie who knows nothing? All right, so yeah, there isn't one. So if you know nothing, you're gonna have to learn a little bit about it. But you need 2 hives, you're saying, but you can buy the standard packages that the supply houses offer if you want all the equipment that you'll need. And they usually give you a wide variety they'll give you boxes, they'll give you hive tools, they'll give you lots of things you need so you can buy them that way. They're pricey though, when you buy them that way. And I suggest you start off with new equipment. Do you have anything to add to that, Eddie?
Well, so I did go to the bee school, but I was wondering, is there like I've seen a couple places, is there a place to go and just look hands-on and look at stuff? Do I have to do it online?
Yeah. You can go to Bee Commerce in Newtown. I don't know where you live, but
Okay.
that's, go ask my friend Leslie, who owns that shop and runs it.
Okay.
Has been for years. She's a great beekeeper. She's one of our master beekeepers in the state of Connecticut. And you can see everything you need. And also you can ask her that exact question and she'll help walk you through everything you need.
Okay.
All right, so
Perfect.
that's a good store here in Connecticut. You can do that with.
Newtown. Great. Thanks.
From Tracy, we have another question. Would Varrox also be a treatment for packages of bees arriving in late March? Now, that's a great question. And the answer to that is yes, you can do that. But for packages, it's really cool if you can vaporize them. So if you wanted to do that, Tracy, that would even be better. You can vaporize them right in the package, or you can install them, wait till they have brood, and before any brood is capped, then vaporize them. That's the best way to do it. So if you don't have access to a vaporizer, then Varroxsan would work as a treatment. You can also use other treatments for packages also. You can see on our website, we have in our resource departments, we walk you through all of the different treatments that you can use. One of our members put it together. It's a wonderful resource for everybody that wants to go look and see what kind of bee treatments are available, what are the temperature ranges under which those bee treatments can be used, how to apply them. It's all on our website. So just go ahead and look at that. And under our resource tab, ctbees.org and resources, it will tell you everything you need to know. Kirk has something and he likes to treat with OEV and see mite drop on a sample board. Yeah, that's you won't need a sticky board for that because they'll all be dead. They're just laid down there. And a low drop would indicate, especially if you do that early in the season before there's a lot of brood. And I agree with Kurt that would indicate a low infestation after you did OAV. You know, what Kurt is doing there is really a valuable tool. He's an experienced beekeeper and he knows how to handle this. But he's using OAV as a diagnostic tool in addition to a treatment. And it's a great way to do it. And for folks that aren't used to this and have access to a vaporizer and do have sticky boards, you can also put a sticky board under there. It's not necessary, but you can do it. And in that case, you can look at mites, you know, and see what they look like and count them. So my article comes out in March of the American Bee Journal. I did a lot of research on sticky boards, and I'm suggesting a way to use them effectively. And if you have a subscription to ABJ and you are curious about what I've written on this subject, and you can read it in ABJ. So I've sort of like introduced some new science on it and given you some ways to like interpret the results that you might not be aware of, or folks haven't discussed with you in some ways. But that's a great suggestion, Kurt. Thank you. Anthony, could you buy better comb, pre-drawn comb, and not run the risk of using disease frames? Yes, Anthony, you can do that. So Anthony wants to know, there is a product called Better Comb. It is not beeswax. It is a combination of paraffins. And my experience has not been good with it, but if other folks have used it and bees took to it right away, let me know. But I know that we did a little experiment with it in the yard last year and the bees avoided it and drew their own comb rather than use the Better Comb. But I think eventually they did use the Better Comb. I'll see in the springtime. I'm not really sure, but that is an alternative, Anthony. You could use that. And maybe if they only have Better Comb, they'll use it. But in the case where we used it, the bees were capable of being able to draw comb or use the Better Comb. And I thought for sure they would use the Better Comb because it was right there pre-drawn and ready for the go, but they didn't. They avoided it and drew their own comb and then used that. So Frank, you have some experience with it. So why don't you tell us what you found?
Yeah, we used it in the honey supers, and
Oh, okay. It was
it
super.
was amazing how fast they wound up putting honey in those frames.
Okay.
I mean, the only drawback, I guess it is when we harvested some of it, I didn't particularly care the way the fragments came out, but I
Oh, so
haven't
the
reused
cappings?
them
You talk about the cappings?
again. I'm curious to see if the bees will build it up, use it again. As far as the honey supers, we used them. We did put them in some of the deeps, but I found that they used their own comb. They would rather, like you said, Bill, use
Yeah.
their own comb rather than the better bee comb in the deeps.
Yeah,
That
so
helps.
I never used it in it. We didn't use it in supers, but it would be really valuable if it does work in supers, and if it doesn't work in brood boxes, that would be okay. But if it works in supers, a lot of new beekeepers have a problem with getting drawn comb for honey production. The only thing I would caution you with from is if you are going to end up with some mixture of paraffin and beeswax.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing, in my opinion. So when you harvested your honey soup, they cap off that honey with their own wax, right?
Yes.
So what do you do with it? What do you do with the cappings?
I mean, I keep all of any old wax or any old cappings, and I melt it down, and I use it on the plastic foundation, the frames, and I'll use those in other hives.
I just don't like the idea of it contaminating our wax supply.
No, I understand, and I mean, we used it the first time last year. I
Yeah.
think I wanted to do it because we never really had a honey harvest because I didn't have any real built out frames. I wasn't going to take some from my mentor. So I tried it and I did like it because again, the bees took to it and they started storing honey in the honey supers within a week, 2 weeks, which to me, that was exciting.
Yeah, no, that is exciting. I mean, it doesn't affect the taste of the honey, of course. So
No, and then we filtered it. I mean, we screen filtered it twice, and then we used cheesecloth also to get any impurities out.
and I don't have enough experience with it that I could say for certain that it wouldn't be used in the brood box. I just never saw it used. And so, Gary, you had some experience with it also, Gary?
Yeah, about 5 years ago, Dad and I tried probably like 5 or 6 frames. Just as Frank was highlighting, just kind of jumpstart a young hive. And by midsummer, and the brood second deep, it was starting to melt. So comb was losing its foundation, the design. So we just pulled it out at that point and threw it away.
So the melt point on paraffin and the melt point on beeswax is way different. So paraffin will melt at a lower temperature than beeswax will. It's very unusual in our climate to have beeswax melt out of your combs, even if they're not being used. But in other climates, it will. But you have to have extreme temperatures, way over 100, and for extended periods of time, and no bee activity in the box because the bees will keep it cool. So Peter Hayes is asking, so what do you got going here, Peter?
No, my question was just with this Varroxsan and being on the hive for 8 weeks and being a little bit easier on us with the temperatures, can go in earlier. Do we still need to worry about, mixing up our treatments over the course of a year, or would this cover us maybe so we don't have to buy so many different treatments?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that because it's the first year I'm using it. But if Varroxsan does control mites at a manageable level, and that keeps the virus vectors down to acceptable levels, and we go into September with a low mite count and healthy bees, we're done. We wouldn't have to. But if you have decided that maybe you want to do another vaporization, or you want to use a thymol-based product in September, you could also move these treatments. It works with other treatments, is what I'm trying to say. So you could keep a regimen and do it that way, keep it up like that. But yeah, so I'm hoping for Varroxsan, which the varroa will have not been able to work up a resistance to oxalic acid because it kills them in a mysterious way. We don't know what, but it's a mysterious way, and so that keeps them down. So we'll see. That's a good question, and we'll see the answer for that. They said that Varroxsan, you should not rely on your only mite treatment, right? So, and the thing is, you're not knocking down mites to zero with Varroxsan. The problem that we made for ourselves, our self-inflicted wound, was to think that these oxalic acid and glycerin strips were going to kill mites like we saw early in our war against mites when we first started to use really harsh organophosphates and all of that to kill them. And it killed every mite except for 2 in the colony. And those 2 went on to then just reproduce because they were resistant to the formula, and then those formulas went out of use because the mites built up a resistance to them. Varroxsan may keep those levels very low, but if it doesn't, then as Anthony's mentioning, you got to knock them down again with something. And we have plenty of stuff that would work at that point. Our product has always been a summertime product that is when high temperatures around and you want to treat for mice after you pulled your honey supers off in July, say for instance, and now you still got all of the hot August and you're way above the temperature limits for even thymol or oxalic acid or formic acid. Say for instance, Varroxsan doesn't have that temperature limitation, so you can be able to put it on even if it's real hot. Gail has a question. My syrups and candy with water from the kettle.
No,
Oh,
for
sorry.
the candy boards, just
Yeah,
to start the sugar mixing up with the sugar.
Oh, so you're using like boiling water?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need boiling water for that though. So for just put sugar and water together, you're not putting a lot of water in the sugar if you're going to make it if you're going to make a sugar cake, you're only putting a little bit in.
But do you think it would produce the HMFs?
No, not if you're just putting a little bit of boiling water in and then stirring it around with sugar, and then it turns into a cake. Is that right? You're not boiling it to softball consistency.
Oh no, no, the
Yeah.
sugar's in a bowl and I toss some water in it and mix it until it's a good consistency. And
Yeah, you don't need hot water for that. So you can use regular cold water and then just let it sit overnight. In the morning, it'll be hard enough to put out on the colonies. It makes a little cake like.
yeah,
All right,
okay,
so you don't need that hot water step if you don't want to use it.
okay, thank you.
All right, Tully.
Yeah, that's me.
All right. All right. So you're asking for a friend who couldn't make it to tonight's meeting. That's what we used to say all the time. I'm asking for a friend, like, so they have a little visitor in their colony. I know who this is probably. If having a mouse in the hive will kill the bees, having a mouse in a colony will kill you. I mean, it's just horrible. They may survive it. They may kill the mouse. The mouse will live in the bottom, urinate in the colony, eat what it can down below the bees, where it won't be bothered. The frames will smell like mouse urine and you'll never get that smell out. And, you'll have to move your bees out of that colony. So it won't kill them. It could kill them, I guess. If it's a really weak colony, they will eat the bees if they can get at them, but they generally can't. Usually a mouse or a vole will get killed in the colony and then they propolize it. They pull all the hairs off of it and then they propolize it. So that's what they do naturally. When one gets into a tree cavity, they kill it. And I don't know if they're going to kill that one or not. So I think that's it. Hive Alive. Yes, Kurt, I think the Hive Alive fondant is an enzyme-based fondant. So I agree. That one is a good option. What's the process for getting a mentor? Go to ctbees.org and look up our mentor program. And then of course you always can come to the bee yard. That's everybody's mentor is the bee yard, and that starts in March. And you can come there. There's one Saturday a month, and you can learn all about bees.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you
by
so
looking
much.
at our bee cap. Yeah. So it's in Cheshire, that bee yard. All right. So that's about it for tonight's questions. So thanks so much for everybody coming. And thank you all that made a contribution in terms of either asking a question or helping me answer one. And I look forward to seeing you